Hello, and welcome to Personality. I'm your host, Lauri Rollings, and my guest today is Lana Wood, who is the founder of Parsley Employer Software Solutions. Parsley is a data-driven wage and benefits management company that's working to find solutions that empower employers and their employees to find a benefit strategy at the intersection of public and private benefits. Lana, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here. So I know that one of the things that Parsley does is that it works to help employers and employees address something called the benefits cliff. Can you explain to us what the benefits cliff is?
Sure, absolutely. So a benefits cliff is a phenomenon that happens when a person who is working and is using any form of public assistance like Medicaid, also called Badger Care in Wisconsin, food share, which is formerly called food stamps, a housing subsidy, or any other form of public assistance. If they get a raise or if they increase their hours and their income increases, they may hit an eligibility threshold where they will start receiving either less of that benefit or get cut off from it completely. And a benefits cliff is a phenomenon that happens when if you lose more than you gain. So essentially, like maybe you got $1 in wages, but you lost the equivalent of $1.50 or $3 in public assistance. And one thing I like to make clear is that it's not a guarantee that that will happen as your income increases. It doesn't always happen, thankfully. But what is challenging is being able to tell what will happen, especially if you're using more than one, because they don't all have the same rules or cutoff points in their income eligibility.
Yeah, I can definitely see that being an issue when people enter a construction apprenticeship, for example, because often people experience a increase in wages from their prior jobs when they enter an apprenticeship, which can make them ineligible for things like childcare, which is something that we discussed in a previous episode of this podcast with one of my guests, Kyla Engelke. Can you explain how Parsley came about and how Parsley helps address that benefits cliff?
Yeah, so our origin story is pretty interesting, not the typical way a HR related software comes about. In my previous role before starting to do Parsley full time, I was a workforce grants manager for the city of Madison. So not workforce development funds or federal funds, but city tax levy funding to support local nonprofits like the Urban League. We also supported WRTP Big Step in Madison and different adult education and job readiness programs. And so in the context of that work, I built a lot of partnerships with local organizations, and the opportunity came to compete in a competition that was locally called Dream Up, but nationally is called the Alliance for the American Dream. And that was funded by Eric Schmidt and Wendy Schmidt. And the competition, I like to say, was a lot like grant writing meets Shark Tank meets American Idol. It was like a social impact driven tech competition, and it had phases, and the goal was to use tech and data to increase people's net income. So that could be increase their wages or their earned income or decrease expenses. And so benefits cliffs really fell really sweetly in that spot because it's a data problem and it's all about net income. So partnered with a lot of local workforce development organizations, and we were supported by the University of Wisconsin Institute for Research on Poverty to essentially win funding in the competition to build Parsley. And so now I have a product advisory council that includes the Urban League of Greater Madison, the United Way of Dane County, the Employment Training Association, the South Central Workforce Development Board, and the Latino Academy of Workforce Development, and a revenue sharing agreement with them. So that's how we came about. How I got turned on to the idea of benefits cliffs and how to address them, that is another story which I'll tell probably in response to another question. But that's the interesting origin story of this particular tech company. And to get to your second question is, how do we help? So Parsley does two things. Essentially, what we've done is marry the public benefits eligibility algorithms, so basically the eligibility rules for 15 different public benefits and tax credits right now just in the state of Wisconsin, with the possibility of putting employer or union benefit data in and seeing where would these benefits cliffs happen. And you can do that two ways. You can do that with modeling. So I could put in some personas and I can show you a chart of that. So those who would be watching the YouTube video of this could see that if they wanted to. But then also it's a personal tool. So let's say you are that apprentice and you need to understand what is your career path, that you can see what will happen if I take this raise. How much do I actually need to be making to break even? And with that information, you can do a few things. A lot of times people say, well, what happens when someone finds out that there's a cliff? Are they just going to quit or ask for a raise? And the answer is yes, but that's already happening. You just don't know that it's happening. And the person in that situation, unfortunately, is making decisions that aren't the best for their situation because they don't have all the information. So, so yeah, those are the two ways that you can use Parsley. You can model, find the cliffs, and then look at your benefits stack and see what can we do. And I know in the last episode that I just listened to of your podcast, Kyla was telling you about some of the childcare solutions that are popping up in Wisconsin. So those are some good examples of what you can do to like help address the cliffs.
Great. So I have a couple of follow-up questions. First, you referenced an American Idol-like portion of the grant competition. Was there a singing portion?
No singing.
Okay.
I did compete against someone in a different pitch competition who won the People's Choice, and she juggled, which I thought was a little unfair. But no, there was no singing. It was just constantly pitching over and over. So it was like blend Shark Tank and American Idol, and it like winnowed up to like the finalists. And yeah, so it was a lot of learning, a lot of new skills.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of pressure. So congratulations on making it to the end. And then a second follow-up question, you did mention that you have a chart you can show us that kind of demonstrates some of the phenomena that you're talking about. Would you mind sharing that with us, or those who are watching the YouTube video can see what the benefits cliff looks like?
Yeah. And I just wanted to say too, while I'm finding that, that this is something that might affect more people than you think. And I know that, Kyla said that as soon as you start apprenticeship, you may be losing all of those benefits. You likely are losing all of them. And people often will ask me, well, where is the cliff? And there's no magic number. That would be like you telling me what your hourly rate is as an employee and me being able to tell you how to file your tax return, because I need to know if you're married. I need to know if you have dependents. I need to know if money is getting taken out for health insurance. I need to know if you have a mortgage and student loan and all. So some of those would be the same factors that impact your benefits eligibility. And some of them are different, but it's equally as individualized to the household. So I like to say, just to give people an idea, that if you're a family of 3 or 4 and you have children in childcare, you could be hitting a benefits cliff around like $75K, maybe. But again, that's just like a reference point. It could be less, it could be more. But so if you're a single person and you have kids in childcare, once you hit like 35, 40,000 a year, that's when you're going to start to struggle. So it's easier to keep your income lower to secure your health care, your child care, etc. So I just wanted to give that reference point before jumping into the slide, because this is a very like specific scenario, but you can see how the concept kind of proves true generally.
Great. That's helpful context.
All right. So the slide you're seeing right now is modeling out the income changes for a particular person in the cement mason apprenticeship in Dane County. And so here what I've modeled is a single parent with 2 children in childcare. And what I've modeled here is worst case scenario, where their income review for all of their benefits is on the same day and they lose them the day they start the job. So this is like 2.5 not great years for this person. Best case scenario, it would just be 1.5 not great years. So you can see even spreading that out, the impact of that out, it still would be a bit of a hurdle. So what I have here is a person who, let's say they're making $20.20 an hour before they get accepted and join an apprenticeship. Maybe they're a CNA. At that wage, they, with all of the public benefits that they have available to them, like Badger Care, child care assistance, food share, I believe I may have them using a housing voucher in this scenario as well. They can meet their expenses modeled based off of average expenses and market rate, rent, etc., and have about $300 left over, $302.88. And that's not budgeting that they have any debt to pay or, very frugal budget. So then they get accepted into the apprenticeship and their wages go up $12.02. So they go to they go to $32.22 an hour. So that is a huge raise. But because of the benefits cliff that they experience with one or more of those benefits, they're now in the hole after paying expenses $637 a month. So
wow.
I said that wrong. They're in the hole $337 a month, which is a $630 net loss, right? So they get these successive raises throughout their apprenticeship, a certain amount every 700 hours. So you would, if you're looking at the chart, you would see it looks like a staircase, and it's like one big jump down and then slowly moving back up. And they don't get back up to zero, like net break even, until 16 months into the apprenticeship.
Okay.
So not great, which means they'd be initially $337 in the hole the first 4 months, and then a little less each month because they're getting a little more money. But all that time, if they're not able to pay for, I don't know how they're paying those bills if they manage to stay in the apprenticeship. And by the time they get to that actual break-even point, they've accrued about $2,840 of debt. But that's over 16 months. So then you can see them slowly digging themselves out of that hole. And they're not back to where they were until journeyman status, like 32 months in.
Wow. And
even then at month 32, they have $285 left over after expenses, whereas before, making $20 an hour, they had $300. So they're still $15 less net disposable income, making literally twice as much as they were when they started. So this is a pretty difficult path for someone who would want to get through apprenticeship with a young child if they're a single parent, single earner. And it might still be difficult with a partner because they may hit some of the same cliffs depending on their partner's income. So when you think about the trades and who's coming into the trades and recruitment, it would be people probably in their 20s, maybe 30s. So the folks who are the right age to have young children. And when we think about trades wanting to recruit women who, if they're single, the childcare is their burden. And if they're partnered, that they're also likely more to be responsible for the childcare. This becomes a real equity and inclusion issue that we need to address if we want to see, that 2% of women in the trades increase. So I'm gonna pause and see if you have any questions about that before we talk about maybe some solutions.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it seems like this is a very perverse disincentive for people to invest in themselves by taking an apprenticeship because of the short-term hit to their pocketbook. And it's hard to see into the future that, eventually after, I've been in the trade for a while, I'll be making higher wages. I'll have I'll have the health benefits. I'll have the pension benefits. But in the short term, it seems like this drives people out of the trade or prevents them from even considering coming into the trade in the first place. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, I'd love to share some themes from what I've observed, but then also a particular story. So the themes that I've observed when I am bringing Parsley into workforce training classes and talking to groups is that there's always two groups. I don't really believe in like binaries, but it seems to be the case with this because you either know it or you don't. There's folks who are looking at me kind of blank and like, I don't know what they're thinking. And I'm like, okay, am I speaking Martian? And then there's this other side of the room, which typically tends to be older, and they pipe up and they start talking about when they lost Badger Care or Medicare and they had to reduce their hours because they need their insulin to live, or
Right.
what hack that they managed so that they could keep a benefit and also grow in their career. And then what you see happening is the folks who don't know just looking at the folks who do and really listening and trying to learn from their experience. And it's just like all things financial, you could try to prep people, but you kind of have to live through it, just like the way we all approach retirement savings when we're young or whatnot. And folks aren't being taught this to begin with, right?
Totally.
So you do see people going into paths that they will hit this and end up exiting. And one story in particular that hit me really hard and was part of why I was passionate about trying to build this and start working on systemic solutions was a conversation I had at a group called Construction Workforce Diversity Alliance. Is a group that meets in Madison and has tried to increase women and people of color in apprenticeships specifically. And I haven't been involved for a while, but we did various things to increase awareness and support union and non-union contractors and folks in industry. And the nonprofit workforce training partners that were a part of it, also played a big role. And so Operation Fresh Start out of Madison does programs where they help students re-engage in high school and get their diploma. And then they also have like career paths. So some folks in the trades may be familiar with their work where they rehab housing, affordable housing, and learn different construction related skills. And so I'm sitting at the Construction Workforce Diversity Alliance meeting in between staff from Operation Fresh Start and someone who is in the electrician industry. And there was a young woman who had joined, who was a Operation Fresh Start grad and had joined the electrician apprenticeship. And the industry fellow asked the OFS employee, "Oh, how is Sherry doing?" And he had to say, "Oh, she had to quit because she can no longer afford her childcare." And,
Wow.
That was a moment where I just kind of had to ask, like, well, what are we doing? We're trying to increase diversity in the trades. And it's awesome that I have this app that can spit out these answers with a few presses of the button, but you really could have predicted this, years in advance just by looking at the policies. And we're just not framed to, I'm not blaming anyone. It's just, we're not framed to think that way. And so what solutions could have been put in place like wraparound supports that could have kept her, in the trade. Because, as I mentioned, if you're looking at the slide, this is the worst case scenario, but her income review might not have been 6 months in. So the first net loss could have been $124 a month because she maybe already had a couple of those step increases. And when you look at the total I've switched it to a her. It's always been a her in my mind, this scenario that I'm mapping out. You look at her total amount of expenses she can't pay over the course of this 32 months, it's less than $3,000 total. So if we were willing to put in $100 a month on average for this apprentice and front load it, like maybe she could start out at breaking even. And I mean, I think everybody probably could use at least $300 more than expenses, for emergencies, anything, a month. But if she could even start out at the $68 after expenses instead of the negative $340, like that would be great. And I think one of the things that folks need to be able to get a handle on around this issue is that those of us who have been in, pretty solid, stable careers for a long time, or maybe in a union, or have had a pension, we understand our job as the source of our security. You don't want to restart a healthcare deductible in June. So, that's part of, your calculus about getting a new job. You don't want to lose the vesting and the matching on your retirement. And, if you lose a job, you need to find another one to get all of those things back. And there's a very long-term orientation. If you are in a different position where you have been relying, or your family has a long time been relying on public assistance, the job is not the primary source of your financial security. It's one factor. And while union member who has this great pension may be really thinking about making sure they keep that job, it's a different relationship if I can't make more than $23 an hour, and if my income goes lower, I'll be okay, but if my income goes higher, it won't. And so in that scenario, what keeps me to this job? Because I can probably make $23 an hour somewhere else as well. Right. And I'm not worried about the pension because I don't have one. Or if it is available, I'm not using it because I need every take-home pay dollar possible to meet my expenses. And I don't need to worry about the healthcare plan and restarting a deductible, because if I do have a deductible, it's not connected to my job. And so being able to tie folks' financial security to the actual job they have is really key to keeping them when they're in this phase of a potential benefits cliff. And I think the wraparound support solutions that folks are coming up with, and then also there's like internal benefit strategies that can be deployed, really hold a lot of promise to see retaining folks and keeping, I guess what people talk about as like employee loyalty, but I feel like that's importing, like if I can't keep this job because I can't pay my rent or feed my kids or have healthcare, it's not really a question of loyalty, Right. It's a question of basic needs. But being able to provide those supports will more greatly tie that person's financial security to your job, which is what you want for life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because we want people to move into family sustaining careers and not stay in relatively low paying jobs just to hang on to their benefits. And, although your experience has been this affects a lot of women, it affects a lot of men too, because the average age of an apprentice, depending on the apprenticeship program, is somewhere between 26 and 28 years old. So these are folks who probably have a family already. They've been working for a while. They may have student debt as well, because a lot of people decide that they want to leave the college path. I heard it over and over again when I was on apprenticeship committees. The most common answer we got for, if you could go back and change one thing in your life, what would you do differently? And they all say, well, I wish I would have gotten into the trades sooner. Mm-hmm. And so we want to remove some of those barriers to entry. So I can see where this is an issue for all kinds of people from our current generations needing some assistance to be able to make doing an apprenticeship a practical, financially feasible undertaking. So what are some of the specific solutions that employers and others can implement to try and address this benefits cliff?
Yeah, so that childcare stipend that Kyla was talking about for apprentices, that's a great solution. And one of the things that I think is an interesting insight that folks might not think about is sometimes the folks who need the help the most, if they are using public assistance, are actually like less expensive to help, because you can hit a cliff without losing the whole benefit. It could just be that your copay, the portion you have to pay, has gone up, which is still not the full amount. So helping that person pay for childcare is relatively probably going to be cheaper than it is someone who's not using the benefit at all. And that's one of the use cases of Parsley, is to map out where you're going to see that when you think about affordability to provide a benefit like that. And one of the vehicles you could do that with is a dependent care flex spending account. So we're all familiar with the healthcare, the medical FSA, and we think that the dependent care FSA follows all the same rules, but it's a little different. There's a couple things that are a little different. It's not as helpful to someone in this situation if it's just their money, because unlike the healthcare FSA, you don't get it all available to you January 1. You have to accrue it. So you're basically just saving the tax dollars on, what you're paying every month. It's not going to front load addressing this cliff, which is what this person needs. And so that's one piece where it's a little different. Another piece where it's different is that you can only match a healthcare or medical FSA $500 if the other person isn't putting money in. And that's not how it works with a dependent care FSA. You could put all employer contribution up to that person's pre-tax limit if you wanted to, without a penny of their own. And it's so that's a lot more than $5,000. And $500. And that would be considered like a seed instead of a match. So you can seed versus match, and the limits are different for those two benefits. And so I think there's a lot more flexibility to use a dependent care FSA. And also, unlike the medical FSA, it's only going to cost you with the people who have kids. So, and if they don't spend it, you get to keep it. So you could make that money available to that young person, like that OFS grad that I was talking about. And if her childcare renewal doesn't happen right away, so she doesn't have to pay as much in childcare, you just hold on to it for the next person or the next year. And she's not any the worse, and neither are you. So that's one solution that I think is a great example that could be really targeted toward this cliff specifically. And there's other things you can leverage too, and I don't want to get too into the weeds, but there's kind of three scenarios. And when we're talking apprenticeship, we're talking about, we see a cliff, we want to get the person to surpass it and keep growing their income. And the other scenarios are, I want to give this person a raise, but I am not going to be able to double their income. So what can I do? Like, how much of a raise can I give them? And or what can I do instead? And then the third scenario would be, I can't really give this person a raise, but I know they're struggling. What in here, in my benefits stack, can I use to make their life more sustainable and also bring that loyalty in by tying their financial security to this job? And so some of those solutions, pre-tax, post-tax, like that definitely matters to you as the employer, and it does benefit the employee some, but sometimes the post-tax, pre-tax doesn't even really matter for the public benefits. So if you wanted to do a stipend for medical costs that is post-tax, because that's a expense reimbursement, it's not going to be treated the same way as income for that person. So it could be another great solution.
Great. And so, is navigating potential solutions something that Parsley can help employers do?
Yes. So, in the beginning, when I said I actually, it's funny because I got this question a lot pre-COVID, but post-COVID, I think folks have become very aware of the financial struggles that a lot of working families have. So if you think that someone may need to quit or ask for a raise when they see a cliff, why not address it ahead of time with your benefit strategy? So what I can do is model different personas like we did with this graph that I showed you of a single parent with 2 children, no additional income. I could do the same thing with different amounts of partner income and see what does that look like for someone in a dual income household at different levels. I could model if you wanted to ask questions about your workforce, like, if you were 25 and not still on your parents' insurance, like, what would this entry-level position we have really look like? And so we could model out, what does this job look like if you don't have any healthcare expenses? What does this job look like if you're eligible for Badger Care? What does this job look like using your benefits? And really just look at different potential trouble spots that could be costing you in turnover and also costing you in limiting the opportunity to diversify your workforce, either because people can't advance or because people self-select out because they know it's not going to be a good opportunity for them.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned, I think it's pretty clear that addressing the benefits cliff has major benefits for the employee themselves. And you touched a little bit on turnover, but what are some of the other benefits for the employer to address the benefits cliff?
Yeah, so turnover is the obvious one, but I also think recruitment and your reputation. So when we think about that young woman who I'm calling Sherry from Operation Fresh Start, she obviously had some barriers. I mean, she was doing a remedial program to finish her high school diploma, and she was exploring this trade, which is very not traditional for women. And I'm imagining that some of the people in her life were watching, thinking, what are you doing? And this is going to be interesting. Why would you want to do that? And then they saw her fail in that pathway. So what is the impact on her community for folks wanting to go into the trades? Probably not great. And so I think it's not just keeping the employees, it's what does your recruitment look like? Because if you have the opportunities, you have paid on the job training, and you can make sure that someone doesn't lose their childcare, I mean, that's like a win-win-win and a strong recruitment tool. And I actually was chatting with a person involved in career pathways in the medical system, and they had designed pathways but folks weren't taking the jobs at the end of the pathway. And the benefits cliff issues around childcare specifically were one of the issues. And they deployed some solutions to do some wraparound supports during the training. And they saw that some of the outcomes got better, but they also saw that the people enrolling were not their incumbent workers. So the CNAs making $18 an hour at that hospital are not the folks enrolling in that program. And I haven't been able to look at their specific numbers, but I think it's because either these folks think that they're going to hit a cliff because of what they saw from folks who went through it before, or they know that they're going to hit a cliff even when they get out the other side at the final you've arrived rate in that, whatever that profession's pay scale is, that maybe that's when they're going to hit the cliff. Mm-hmm. And so I would love to dig deeper and say, okay, so why aren't the incumbent workers who could increase their income 300% with paid on the job training at the employer that they actually work at, choosing to stay at $18 an hour? Mm-hmm. We've already talked about what the possible answers to that question could be and what the possible solutions. So your recruitment, your reputation, turnover, but then also just the investment that you're putting into each employee and training. Like every time you lose someone, like these career pathways at the hospitals are, at least a $5,000 investment per person over time, depending on the depth of the training, which isn't even counting what the Workforce Investment Board is putting into it. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, you've answered all the questions that I could think of, but is there anything else that you would like our audience to know?
Well, I think the main insight that I feel like I've been uncovering during doing this work is just how siloed all of our worlds are. And, there's not really a way around that, because that's why we have lawyers. That's why we have HR folks. That's why we have plumbers. That's why we have electricians. And if you're in the trades, that if you're building a building, that the plumbing and the electrical, are there going to be places where they could possibly interact and it would be bad? Like, you don't want wires to get wet, or
right.
The HVAC and the electric have a distinct intersection. And employer benefits and public benefits are kind of the same. They're like two different worlds, but they have these places of interaction. And if they don't go well, it doesn't work for the employer or the employee. And because we all like to be professionals and we are experts in our fields, there's not really expertise in this space of where they intersect. And so I don't know if this is probably not a great analogy, but I think Parsley, we're trying to be like the GC of the space, but not really the GC, because I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but providing insights of where these things intersect can really unlock a lot of opportunities to gain efficiency, to not waste energy, waste money, and cause problems.
Yeah, I think it's a great analogy. Or like you're the BIM of the public-private benefit intersection, building information modeling. You're trying to figure out where things conflict and where there's going to be a fire.
Yeah, I think that's a much better. That's a great analogy, and I have some good friends who are in that field, and they will like that. Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, this has been a really enlightening and informative conversation. So I really want to thank you for taking the time to join us today, Lana.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I will put information about Parsley in the show notes. So if you're interested in checking it out, you can visit their website. And thank you again for joining us, Lana.